Yeah.
All
Cool.
right.
So we're gonna welcome on Jordan Hall here, writer for the Philadelphia Flyers, and obviously big time here. With the deadline coming up, pretty quiet so far, but Jordan, just starting here last night as Alex and I were down there, and I know Connor was watching and everything like that. The big story today is the takeover, really, of the Rangers at the game last night, and obviously you were down there watching as well. What was kind of your take there? And I mean, in your whole tenure of being with the Flyers and writing for them, have you ever really seen anything like that?
Nothing quite to that degree. I've seen Rangers and Islanders fans take the Wells Fargo Center and the Devils fans as well, and you can hear them, and it's a very doable commute for fans, and I think Flyers fans have done it, vice versa, but nothing to that degree. And I think it really just painted a picture of just how far the Flyers have fallen and how deep of a rebuild they have right now, and also how well the Rangers are doing and how well fans or how excited fans are about their team, especially getting Patrick Kane. So I even saw it about an hour and a half before puck drop. Fans are allowed to come into the arena, and a lot of fans kind of flood the areas around the tunnel where the players come out for warm-ups, where you maybe get pucks or get high fives or whatever it may be. And Rangers fans just took right to their tunnel. And then Flyers fans, there was only a small section of them. And it just said a lot to me. Like, wow, Rangers fans are coming to an away arena and they're getting there early, and Flyers fans aren't quite there. So to me, it just really painted a picture of where the contrast between the two teams are right now. And the Flyers need to get it back to where they're getting fans in their building and keeping away fans out.
Yeah, Jordan, the one thing, with the Flyers, the deadline's right around the corner, and a lot of the talk is, where the front office is right now, and obviously the fan base is throwing a lot of criticism their way, and of where Chuck Fletcher is, and the ownership is. So, going, I know you don't want to foreshadow too much into the off season, but if this is another quiet, deadline, do you think that somebody like Chuck Fletcher could be out the door sooner rather than later?
I'm not sure he'll be out the door, but I wouldn't rule out something along the lines of a position change or potentially promoting someone to general manager, where Chuck Fletcher still keeps his president status. He's president of hockey operations and also general manager. It's something where he could also remain president of the team, and then someone else is promoted to general manager. I wouldn't rule that out, but he's well liked here, and people trust him. They like the way he includes everyone. I think they're going to give him a longer leash than a lot of people think, but fans have the right to be frustrated and upset, and he deserves plenty of criticism. But at the same time, he's in his fourth full season, and I think ownership understands that they're very much in a transition right now, and they're starting to get younger, and they're trying to build it back up. So I think ownership and people that make the decisions on his status are going to be patient here. As hard as that is for Flyers fans, I think they're going to be patient. And people do forget that he gave them their best season in over a decade in 2019-20. They won a playoff series for the first time since 2012. They came one win away from the East Final. And then COVID has really hurt them, and they haven't adjusted well ever since. And it's been all downhill since. But long story short, I think he deserves plenty of criticism, and I think they're going to think long and hard in the offseason about could they make changes to their hockey ops. But I think he's going to get a longer leash than a lot of people expect or maybe want him to. I think there are some positives with Chuck Fletcher that they're going to weigh with the negatives.
Yeah, and along the lines of patience, with Chalk and with the team, they've said that they're going to try to be sellers during the trade deadline, and we've yet to see anything really come to fruition there. But we have some young guys that we can bring up if that's the case, and guys like Tyson Forster, and we saw Elliot Denoye get in the lineup for a couple games, and he's been up and down. So how do you see that sort of playing out? And do they have those guys in mind, like Forster and possibly Wisdom down the line to bring them up and give them a chance?
They definitely do. And we saw it last year with how awful the season was. It kind of got off the tracks real early, that they took a look at a lot of kids. And I think that's going to happen again this season. They're going to, down the stretch here, give some kids a look, see what they can do, just give them a taste of the NHL. whether it's rewarding some prospects that played well, whether it's maybe a college signing like Cutter Gauthier, who could turn pro at the end of his college season, allow him to get a look. At the same time, the Phantoms are actually in a playoff race, and the organization has recently talked about really valuing that and making sure that some of their best prospects are down there getting experience and helping them play meaningful games in Lehigh. So they're going to have to balance the playoff race with Lehigh and then also wanting to give their kids a look up here. But very much the final 20 games are going to be about evaluating people, seeing who fits, seeing who doesn't. And I think a lot of that's going to be around young players getting opportunity, as it should. It's really starting to remind me of last year, which was a really terrible year, but it was a chance to see some young players and give them a look. And that's where I think the Flyers are headed here over the stretch.
Mark, you muted, bro.
I'm muted. There it is. Jeez, I feel like we're back at the beginning of COVID all over.
Yeah.
Aside from that embarrassment, Jordan, your article that you recently posted, wanted to give you a little tire pump there, but obviously Van Riem's like being the top trade target for this team at the deadline. I mean, have you heard any rumblings at all? Is there, a potential team or teams that he would go to? And I guess this isn't a question that you can entirely answer, but what would be maybe a return that they could get on a guy like him in your mind?
Yeah, so I haven't heard anything on which team he could go to. I don't exactly know where he would best fit, but I do think the Flyers could get somewhere in the range of a second or third round pick, and they'll have to retain some salary. He obviously makes $7 million a year, so I don't think teams are going to love that. Contending teams, obviously, it's tough to add salary without subtracting, and a lot of contending teams aren't looking to subtract right now. They're just trying to make moves at the margins where they don't give up too much because they like their team, but they want to add a player like JVR. So I think the Flyers could aim for somewhere in the second or third round pick range. Maybe they get a younger, less established player that they like and that isn't really fitting in the organization now. But somewhere in that range, and I think they'll have to retain some salary. Maybe they'll have to retain half of his salary, which is not a terrible bullet to bite, as long as you get something in return. And they need to get younger. They need to get assets. And I think he's their most likely move, just given his expiring contract and his age and the team wanting to get younger.
Yeah, Jordan, Provorov was another name that was thrown out there, and I know he's been one of their better defensemen in the recent years. He hasn't really blossomed, I think, to the point where fans expected where he'd be at, but he still is probably one of their more valuable assets going into the deadline, and it probably seems unlikely that they'll move on him at this point. Maybe it's an off-season type of move, but what do you think about Provorov's status moving forward and with the team going forward?
Yeah, probably one of the more polarizing players I've covered in a little while here, just given I think some people view him super highly. They believe he's a top pair number one defenseman. And I think there's some people that see him as maybe a 1B, a 1A. Is he partner dependent? Does he need a partner that's going to be a high caliber player to make him better? I think the true number one defensemen make their partner better. They don't need a partner to make them better. So he's gone through some lumps here, as the team has too. But I think the Flyers are not going to sell him short, and you don't want to. He's a 26-year-old that plays every single night. Plays hard, blocks shots, can move the puck. So I don't know if he definitely fits here in the future, but the Flyers don't want to make a rash decision because he's a good asset and a guy that could potentially help you eventually when you get winning again. But definitely a polarizing player that I don't think will be moved at the deadline. I think they're listening on everything, including Ivan Provorov. When you lose as many games as you did last year and when you're in the position the Flyers are, you have to listen on everything. But I really think that would be more of a summer move where there's a little more flexibility. Teams are looking to take on potentially more money and really shake up rosters. But a guy they're going to, I think, really think long and hard about because it's really a tough read of whether he's a foundation piece or if he's a guy that's going to eventually just net you a really good return. Because the Flyers need more high-end talent, and he's a good asset that could get you it.
Yeah, and touching on sort of what we talked about at the beginning of the conversation about the Rangers taking over the Wells Fargo Center last night and sort of that being a reflection of the state of the team. I've actually got a question from one of our viewers. They want to know sort of how you've seen Chuck Fletcher and John Tortorella's attitudes change over the course of the season, and have those changes also been a reflection of the state of the team?
Yeah, John Tortorella has been really honest about how long this can take. I think General Manager Chuck Fletcher has not been as much. I think that comes with the position and the title of those two guys. Chuck Fletcher is the general manager. He's going to probably sugarcoat things a little bit more, try to keep the fan base invested, try to appease people above him that it's not as daunting as it looks. Whereas Tortorella is a guy that's, he's going to be forthright. He's going to be honest. He's not going to BS you. And he's been very forthright about this could take years and years to get right. But I think Chuck Fletcher has definitely changed his tune to more. This is a big transition. It's a very big build back up. He's been reticent to use the word rebuild, but I think deep down he knows this is going to take time and it's going to take some years. Flyers fans might not want to hear that, but I think they can at least respect that they're realizing it's not a quick fix. It just isn't. And that's where it's gotten to. And they need to ultimately draft and develop and take pride in that. And then eventually, if you get to a point where you can add via free agency, then do it. But when they didn't go after Johnny Gaudreau in the offseason, I think that told you it's going to take some time. And they didn't feel like they were ready to really add a player of that caliber with that money. And while I think that would have reinvigorated the fan base a little bit and gotten people back on board, I thought it was a sign that they realized this is going to take time and they need to focus more on drafting, developing, giving young players a shot, and then getting back to making splashes like that. So I think they've been a little misleading in terms of the direction they're taking. Perhaps it's just terminology, and maybe we shouldn't make too much about using buzzwords like rebuild and retool. But I think deep down they're realizing that's where they are right now, and it's going to take time to get fans to buy back in.
Yeah, and just from that rebuild perspective, I mean, people inside the organization probably don't want to use that word. Obviously, as hockey fans and you covering the team, it's pretty evident that it is a rebuild, and we're trying to get to a competitive type team. But with that, I mean, I know that you mentioned the Phantoms are in a playoff race at the moment, but is there a particular guy, defense, offense, that you would maybe want Flyers fans to kind of keep an eye out that could come up through the system, if not at the end of this year, starting with the team next year?
Yeah, I think the Flyers get a lot of flack for their lack of talent. And don't get me wrong, they have a talent deficiency, but I think there are some decent ingredients that are a little more below the surface, not quite there yet. But to me, they have two young goalies. Carter Hart's 24. Samuel Ersson has shown potential. He's only 23. So you have two decent prospects at the most important position of the game. And then you have some prospects down lower. Tyson Forster is a kid that has always opened my eyes. I've seen him at development camp and rookie camps. I've seen him in rookie games. He's got an NHL caliber shot. He's got some moxie to him. So to me, they've needed shoot first wingers, and he's one. I think fans should be excited about him. Elliot Desnoyers is a guy that's just played a couple games here. 5th round pick, but plays the right way, scores goals, around the blue paint. I think he's a hard worker, character type of kid. I think there's a reason to be excited about him. And I think Cam York has a ton there. I think there's a ton in Cam York's game that you should like. A puck moving guy that's going to be a power play quarterback. I don't know his ceiling quite yet, but he's showing a lot this year. So I think you have some ingredients. You have some prospects on the back end like Cam York, maybe Igor Zamula. You had some forwards like Tyson Forster and Desnoyers. Cutter Gauthier is killing it in college, and I think there's a ton of upside there. A kid that plays hard and has some flair to him. And then you have two goalies that there's a ton of upside. I think Cutter Hart's already established, and I think Samuel Ersson is showing that maybe he can push Carter Hart for playing time. So I think there's more ingredients than the Flyers get credit for. Doesn't mean it's not a long ways away, though. These are guys that are just starting to scratch the surface, but they have a lot of players that are 25 and younger that are looking like they could be players. It's going to take time, but I do think there's things you can look to and say, hey, that could be a cornerstone.
Yeah, one guy I think that really stood out to me is Owen Tippett. I like when he got drafted by Florida, and he really had that, like you said, like with Forrester, had that type of shot that's really going to translate to the NHL very well. And he seemed he really couldn't find his footing in Florida at the time, and he was kind of like that reclamation project that the Flyers are kind of looking for right now. And Tortorella kind of got him in the right direction. What do you think about Owen Tippett moving forward? Because it looks like he's probably going to score over 20 goals this year.
Might be the biggest positive of this season because that was a huge trade last year. You're trading franchise icon, a longtime captain, Claude Giroux, and he's the player they got in return. And a lot of people were always going to judge that trade probably on what kind of player Owen Tippett becomes. From what I heard when they got Tippett, it was that he maybe could be a third line player with 20 goal upside. Now it's looking like he could score 25 in his career in one season, maybe 30, and he looks like he could be a top 6 player. So he was, I think, sort of sheltered in Florida because of their talent level down there. Now he's come here, he's got an opportunity, and I think the sky's the limit. He just turned 24 last month, and I think the Flyers think very highly of him. If there's maybe an untouchable, I would say it's on Owen Tippett. And for as much criticism as Chuck Fletcher gets, and it's warranted, I thought he made out pretty well on that Claude Giroux trade. The guy had a no-move clause. He was totally dictating where he wanted to go, justifiably so. And the Flyers got a first-round pick in the future, and they got a player in Owen Tippett. I thought if you look at the Patrick Kane deal, the Blackhawks didn't get much. I thought the Flyers made out pretty well with the Claude Giroux deal for a 34-year-old rental. So I think Fletcher deserves a little bit of credit there. I think there's a lot of upside with Owen Tippett.
And another guy that we could sort of take as a large positive from this season is the development of Morgan Frost. And so I wanted to ask about with Tippett also is how John Tortorella's coaching style has enabled them to grow as players and reach the capabilities of putting pucks in the net and being top 6 forwards for us.
Yeah, this is the biggest opportunity Morgan Frost has gotten at the NHL level. I think the Flyers are really they really were going to let him sink or swim this year. Either show he can be an everyday player at the NHL level or show that maybe he's a tweener. Maybe he's a guy that's kind of in between the AHL and the NHL, big time player at the A, and maybe not really a difference maker in the NHL. I think he's shown he can be a difference maker up here and really play a role, whether it's a second or third line role. I think they still want to see more, though. He's on an expiring contract. He'll be an RFA in the offseason. He doesn't make $1 million yet. He's making, I think, in the 800,000 range. So I think this is a really telling 20 games for Morgan Frost to show if he can take another step and really earn a big-time payday and years of security. I don't know if the Flyers are totally sold on him yet, but he has definitely shown glimpses, and I think he's at least built some confidence up here. I still think there's a ton of upside, but I think he's going to have to show more of the final 20 games, and I think we'll learn a lot more about him.
And I'm on mute again. And we're back.
And we're back.
All right, Jordan. Well, we really appreciate the time, man. I know we were going to keep this to about 20, 25 minutes. So I appreciate you hopping on. Obviously, recurring guest here on the Connor and Mark Show. Make sure to check Jordan Hall out at Twitter, JHallNBCS, as well as his newest article, March 1st, as the Flyers sell for the 3rd straight trade deadline. Van Riemsdyk waits out on his fate. That's on NBCSports.com. Again, Jordan, thanks for coming on so much, man. We really appreciate the insight. And hopefully next time we have you on, we're talking about a team that might be making a bit of a push in the next season, but might have to wait a little bit longer. But Jordan, thanks so much, man.
Guys, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I think fans are going to have to be patient right now, and that's probably a tough word to hear. But I do think the Flyers ultimately are starting to, I think, embrace the challenge ahead of rebuilding, and it could take time, but maybe it fruits into something pretty decent. So I appreciate you guys having me on, and we'll see where the team is next time we talk.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan.
Most definitely.
Thanks, Jordan.
So much, Jordan.